Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the folds of a story so ridiculous, so wine-stained and sandal-dragging, that if you weren't lying in bed right now, you'd probably be Googling it for proof. You're going to walk in the sandals of a god. Well, stagger in them really. Because Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, parties, madness, and maybe just a touch of chaos, once decided to lead a war. And in the middle of it, he took a nap. Not a symbolic nap, not a poetic metaphor. Napum, a real under a tree, don't wake me unless you have grapes kind of nap. In the middle of a military campaign. You probably wouldn't survive this battlefield, not because of swords or arrows, but because you'd be too busy watching a bunch of divine partygoers throw glitter while screaming at elephants. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not walking into a typical war camp tonight. There's no metallic clatter of armor, no grizzled commanders shouting orders. Instead, you smell incense and wine. Lots of it. In fact, it's soaked into the ground, the rugs, and the god lounging in the center of it all. You step around, lyres and half-eaten figs. There's a goat gently chewing on someone's sandal in the corner. And Dionysus, he's reclining, half-draped in a leopard skin, holding a goblet that's been refilled 4 times without him moving. You can't tell if he's giving orders or telling riddles. His soldiers, not really soldiers, they're revelers, wild-haired, ivy-crowned, dancing barefoot and humming songs in unison. This is not a war room. It's a fever dream, the kind where the next logical step after an ambush is a dance circle. But here's the twist. This isn't just a myth made up by bored poets. There's an ancient text, Nonnus's Dionysiaca, that's 48 books long, and mostly about Dionysus leading a campaign to India. Yes, India. With an army made of satyrs, nymphs, and flute girls. The Greeks genuinely told this story with a straight face, and as silly as it sounds now, it reflected real ideas about chaos, ecstasy, and yes, even power. The thing is, Dionysus wasn't a typical god. He didn't rule with thunder like Zeus or war like Ares. He was emotion, unpredictability, the lurching high and dizzying fall of human feeling. And when he went to war, he brought all of that with him. He didn't storm cities. He confused them into submission. And if you thought a marching army was terrifying, try a marching conga line of howling maenads, laughing satyrs, and tipsy generals throwing fruit. You inch past a group of them now. One is whispering secrets to a tree, another is painting stripes on a goat. You half expect to hear battle plans, but instead, a priest is preaching about the pleasures of taking naps on soft moss, and how dreams are actually prophecies in disguise. They don't sharpen blades, they trim vines. Their armor isn't bronze, it's woven ivy. And their war chants, they sound suspiciously like drinking songs. Still, don't let the party hats fool you. Dionysus wins. Somehow. The Dionysiaca insists that kingdoms fall before him, that cities open their gates to him, not out of fear, but out of delirious devotion. He shows up, throws a festival, and boom, conquered. But you also start to notice something else. In every second story, Dionysus disappears. Not dramatically, just poof, gone. Sometimes into the wilderness, sometimes to sleep. Literally sleep. As in the middle of a siege, he curls up under a tree with a wine sack and says, "You guys figure this one out." Historians still argue whether this campaign ever had any symbolic logic or if it was a long, drunken joke the ancient Greeks told each other to explain why wine makes you forget things. There's no archaeological proof of divine vineyards in Punjab, but that hasn't stopped generations of scholars from trying to decode this chaos. Some say it's an allegory of civilization confronting wild nature. Others say it's proof the Greeks were just really into absurdist humor. And others, they say it mirrors the rise and fall of emotional states. The ecstasy, the rage, the collapse. and finally, sleep. And now, you start to see the camp differently. Dionysus isn't just lounging for fun. He's conserving power. Maybe even plotting. Or maybe sleep itself is a weapon. A flex. Imagine being so confident in your victory that you schedule a nap while your enemies scramble outside the city walls. That's not laziness. That's divine-level trolling. Nearby, a Maenad is lighting something on fire. You decide not to ask. Another pours honey into someone's boots. Also not your business. But you're beginning to see it. This war isn't won by violence. It's won by confusion, by spectacle, by emotional overwhelm. While other generals calculated, Dionysus slept. While they drew lines in the sand, he drew a crowd. And while they feared death, he threw parties in its shadow. One scroll even mentions how Dionysus's enemies grew too disoriented to fight. Imagine your front line breaking formation not from arrows, but because half your troops started dancing involuntarily. That's not strategy. That's psychological warfare. With tambourines. And as the wine flows and the firelight flickers across grinning faces, you lie back too. Maybe there's a logic here. Maybe napping in the middle of a war isn't a failure of duty, but a rejection of its terms. Maybe Dionysus is saying, war doesn't deserve my full attention. Wake me when you're ready to laugh. The stars spin slowly above, and you realize this isn't a war god you're following. It's the god of letting go, of turning conflict into theater, of naps as rebellion. And just like that, you understand why the battlefield is so quiet tonight. You wake not because of noise, but because of silence, a kind of too still hush that doesn't belong on any battlefield, the kind that makes you sit up slowly and realize there's no clanking armor, no shouted orders, no dying screams, just the distant hum of a flute. Somewhere behind a grove of cypress trees, someone is singing to a goat. You roll over in your bedding, which is actually just a pile of grapevines someone braided together into a mattress, very on brand, and notice a trail of sandal prints leading away from camp. Curved, looping, like their owner couldn't decide where to go, or had maybe been sipping from Dionysus's goblet again. This is the start of Dionysus's Eastern campaign. That's what the Dionysiaca calls it anyway. Some say it's fiction, others believe it's a shadow memory of real cultic processions, transformed over centuries into something divine. But what you do know is this. Dionysus declared war, and then led his army not west, not towards Sparta, or Rome, but all the way east, into the lands we now call Iran, Afghanistan, and India. And he did it in style. You trudge along behind the vine-woven standard bearers. They're not carrying spears. They're holding fennel stalks wrapped in ivy, called thyrsos. Great for waving dramatically, terrible for stabbing. And yet, these warriors, if you can call them that, are terrifying in their own way. Their eyes shine like they've seen things, drunk things, god things. They march barefoot. Some are howling, others are juggling. A satyr is attempting cartwheels and failing with tremendous confidence. And leading the parade? Dionysus himself, riding a chariot pulled by tigers. Tigers, which, let's be honest, are not known for their patience or wagon-pulling skills. Historians still debate whether these tigers were symbolic or maybe misremembered leopards, or possibly exotic animals like panthers brought west by traders. Others think they never existed and were metaphors for untamed wildness. But the image stuck. Dionysus didn't ride horses like a normal general. He rode chaos. You follow as the procession winds down an old trade route. In some versions, they're following the path of old Phoenician traders. In others, they're forging something entirely new. It's less of a military march and more of a music festival with bad logistics. Supplies are questionable. The plan is unclear. The strategy? Let's vibe until we win. But here's the wildest part. The campaign works. Villages open their gates, not because they're scared, but because they're intrigued. What do you do when a divine man in leopard print robes shows up at your gates, offering wine, theatre, and a 3-day holiday in your honor? You say yes. You always say yes. Or at least that's what the myth says. You pass a stone arch where someone's carved, "Here marched the wine god. We gave him grapes and he left us drunk and dancing." You wonder if that's a victory or just a very successful PR stunt. Some scholars think the story mirrors Alexander the Great's real Eastern conquests, but in reverse. Alexander supposedly retraced Dionysus's steps, not the other way around. He claimed to find the god's old altars and rebuilt them. He even performed sacrifices in Dionysus's honor in India. Maybe because he admired Dionysus, or maybe because he saw in him the kind of legendary wildness that makes history stick. Dionysus's war wasn't about land. It was about legacy, transformation, unsettling the norm. But not everything is laughter and festival garlands. The deeper you travel, the weirder it gets. You come upon a battlefield that doesn't look like a battlefield. There are no corpses, just empty wine cups, masks, and discarded sandals. The enemy reportedly dropped their weapons mid-fight and joined in the dancing. Some accounts even say Dionysus would cast spells to inspire madness, mania, causing opponents to hallucinate, or wander off muttering riddles. Was it divine power, or just very convincing wine and performance? There's one fragment of a ruined scroll you pass that mentions Dionysus caused the enemy captain to believe his own sword had turned into a snake. The man ran screaming into a river. Is that real? Did it happen? No one agrees. But the image is perfect, and that's the thing. Dionysus isn't interested in control. He's interested in awe. He turns order into theatre, war into ritual, and all the while, he keeps drifting, further east, into stranger lands. You see a small grove where someone's tried to plant grapevines, in India, which, if you know anything about viticulture, is ambitious. But the myth insists he tried, that he scattered seeds along the way, that he brought wine to the world. Some versions even say local kings began to worship him, not because of power, but because of pleasure. Imagine converting an entire culture, not through force, but through a really convincing party. And yet, in the middle of all this chaos, Dionysus keeps disappearing, falling asleep, wandering off, letting his army handle things while he naps under fig trees. This isn't laziness, it's a pattern. Some think his naps were divine withdrawals, moments where he let the madness swell without him, like dropping a match and stepping away. Others argue he was communing with dreams, that his sleep was actually a portal between worlds. And some, they say he just really liked naps. There's a famous vase painting where Dionysus is reclining while everyone else is either fighting or panicking. He has grapes. A woman is playing a lyre. He's not helping. And yet somehow, everything's going his way. You pause on the trail, catching your breath. One of the flute girls offers you a sip from a goat horn cup. You decline. Probably best. But as the army winds forward into the dawn, you realize something else. This isn't a god who conquers by accident. It just looks like it. The nap? That's not a failure to lead. That's a performance in itself. A moment of deep trust, or divine trolling. He knows the story ends in his favor. He naps because he can. And maybe, just maybe, because he's tired of pretending war is anything but a circus. The sun is high now, too high, and the air smells of roasting figs and spilled honey wine. You drag your feet behind a parade that still hasn't broken formation. Though, to be fair, formation is a generous word. The satyrs are arguing about whether the path leads to a city or just back to the camp they left 3 days ago. One Maenad is trying to teach a tree to waltz, and Dionysus, nowhere to be seen. Again, this is the third time he's vanished in the middle of a march, and no one seems concerned. A few whisper he's off communing with the forest spirits. One guy swears he saw Dionysus float away on a raft made of tortoises, but you're starting to suspect something else. He just wanted a nap. Again. This time, the god of ecstatic mayhem left behind a note, carved into the rind of a melon. Back soon. Don't let them fight without laughter. It's unclear if that's an order, a proverb, or a really weird joke. Either way, the army marches on. This is where you learn the truth about Dionysus's priorities. It's not about land. It's not about gold. It's about grapes and silk and fine things. Wherever they go, they plant vines, not just for wine, but for shade. You pass tents sewn from peacock feathers, pillows stuffed with dandelion fluff. One officer rides a chariot lined in lavender sachets and insists on tea breaks every hour. This isn't a war. It's a mobile spa with drums. You duck beneath a woven grapevine archway, someone's idea of a war gate, and find a courtyard bustling with movement. Servants are unpacking crates not of rations, but of perfumes. There's a boy polishing an amphora of rosewater, while a general dictates a poem to be recited at the next siege. This is the kind of army that would storm a city, repaint it, and install hammocks. One bronze tablet near the path claims Dionysus personally demanded feather beds be issued to all ranks. A tired soldier is a bad dancer. It reads. Possibly apocryphal, possibly true. Historians still argue whether the comfort-obsessed war logistics of Dionysus were meant to parody real Greek military customs, or were simply a divine whim taken seriously. But it's not all theatre. Not exactly. You pass an old man sharpening what looks like a spear, until you realize it's just a roasting spit. He sees your confusion and smiles. Some of us carry real weapons, just in case. You glance at the next guy in line. He's wielding a fishing rod and a banana peel. Okay, maybe some carry weapons. Still, the myth insists Dionysus won battles, multiple ones, and not just through confusion or charisma. Occasionally, there's violence, chaotic, ecstatic violence. His followers, especially the Maenads, are said to rip enemies apart with their bare hands when provoked. Think of them like berserkers, except with better hair. You hear stories around the campfire, softly told, like lullabies, but terrifying all the same. One tale says a king mocked Dionysus, refused him wine, declared the god a fraud. The next morning, his palace was overrun by wild women singing hymns and tossing flower petals, each one sharp as a blade. Another legend tells of an army that surrounded the god while he napped. Before they could attack, they were overwhelmed with visions, hallucinations of vines choking their weapons, of panthers licking their faces, of their own mothers calling them home. Some say Dionysus cursed them with ecstasis, the Greek root of ecstasy, but literally meaning to be outside oneself. A kind of divine displacement. They weren't killed, they were unmade, confused, out of existence. Now you begin to understand why his army marches the way it does. Why the pillow tents, the music, the endless naps. They aren't indulgences, they're strategy. They're part of a campaign meant not to destroy bodies, but to rearrange minds. Still, you can't help wondering, where is Dionysus? You follow. A trail of fallen grapes into a grove. And there he is. Finally. Reclining under a fig tree, eyes closed, breathing soft. A tiger curled at his feet like a house cat. You approach quietly, unsure if it's safe to speak to a sleeping god. But he opens one eye lazily and grins. Don't worry, he murmurs. The war marches just fine without me. And honestly, it does. Because what Dionysus has built isn't an army, it's a movement, a roving band of believers who don't need constant orders, who operate on rhythm and instinct and a healthy dose of divine madness. He can disappear for hours, even days, and they'll still throw festivals in his name, still chant his songs, still confuse every opponent they meet into submission. You sit beside him, under the shade, and he offers you a handful of olives. Rest is sacred, he says. Too many fight with empty spirits. You nod, not sure what it means, but knowing, somehow it's true. And you remember a scholar's note you once read. The cult of Dionysus teaches that surrender is not weakness, that joy, sleep, and chaos are weapons when wielded without shame. It sounded silly then, but not now. Not as the music rises again in the distance. Not as you feel the earth hum with invisible drums. Not as Dionysus stretches, yawns, and curls back up. Half smiling, already dreaming. You don't even realize when you've started walking again. 1 minute, you're watching Dionysus sleep beneath the fig tree. The next, you're drifting with the parade, if it can be called that, towards some distant, echoing drumbeat. The road is no road at all now, just a ribbon of flattened grass and wine stains, meandering through hills thick with lavender and something that smells suspiciously like incense. A satyr hands you a tambourine. You don't know why. You don't ask. This is the army now. A slow-motion festival slouching toward the next city. No one talks about maps or targets. There's no general barking orders, just rhythmic claps, haunting pipe songs, and the occasional shout of laughter from behind a bush. You're not entirely sure whether this is a war or a parade that got lost. Then, suddenly, a burst of shouting ahead. The drumming stops. The satyrs stiffen. Even the flute girls lower their instruments. There's a pause, uncomfortable and, still, like the moment when someone drops a glass in a crowded room. A messenger arrives, panting, his wreath wilted and crooked. The city ahead closed its gates. They won't welcome Dionysus. Gasps. Someone spills wine, and just like that, the chaos crystallizes. The dancers become warriors. The satyrs snarl. The maenads, who had been twirling barefoot through fields, now grip their thyrsos staves like spears. This army may not have uniforms or discipline, but when someone insults their god, it becomes a matter of divine pride. Still, no Dionysus. Where is he? Someone says he was last seen dipping his feet in a stream, singing to a frog. A maenad rolls her eyes and announces, "He always naps when things get interesting." And this time, it's true. As the war camp hastily assembles into something vaguely organized, you're sent to find him. You trek uphill, passing scattered pieces of jewelry and wine cups. The ground smells sweet and strange, like roasted figs and citrus. Finally, you spot him, again, under a canopy of cypress trees, resting, arms behind his head, mouth slightly open, snoring gently. You hesitate. "They're refusing entry," you say. He opens one eye, yawns. "So," you blink. "So, what should we do?" He stretches. "Give them a parade." You stare, waiting, for elaboration. There is none. And yet, you return to the army. You pass along his orders, just those 4 words. Give them a parade. No one questions it. Instead, they start preparing as if this was always the plan. The drummers form, a rhythm line. The maenads begin painting their faces with wine-stained symbols. The satyrs practice somersaults. One brings out a python and starts wrapping it dramatically around his shoulders. By sundown, the battle formation looks more like a circus audition. But here's the thing. This is a tactic. It's called shock by absurdity, though the ancients had no name for it. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was parodying warfare or offering an entirely new model. But the result was the same: confusion, entrancement, awe. When his army approached a city, they didn't lay siege, they overwhelmed the senses. And that night, that's exactly what happens. The army marches toward the city's gates, not with swords raised, but with torches flaring, drums pounding, and flutes shrieking like birds at dawn. They chant not threats, but ecstatic hymns. They don't demand surrender, they throw fruit. The city guards, half asleep, stumble to their posts and stare. What are they supposed to do with this? One of them tries to shout something, but it's drowned out by a sudden eruption of confetti. Real confetti, made from crushed flower petals. A satyr stands on someone's shoulders and juggles fire. A maenad drops her robe, tastefully, and spins like a cyclone of limbs and ribbons. The front gate creaks under the sound of 1,000 bells. And then, laughter. Not from the army, from inside the city. You hear it, children laughing, then adults, then guards. The spell has worked. The gates open, not to surrender, but to join. Dionysus doesn't walk in. He's carried, still half asleep, on a litter made of vines, wrapped in tiger pelts and smelling like oranges and myrrh. The crowd parts for him like he's sunlight. The parade becomes a festival. The enemy becomes the audience. The siege becomes a celebration. And you stand at the edge, watching it unfold, wondering what exactly just happened. Later that night, around a smoky fire, someone tells you this isn't the first time. Dionysus has turned enemy cities into party, hosts more than once. One tale even claims he walked into a war council and sang them to sleep. Historians doubt that part, but not too hard, because even now you feel it. That strange pull, the haze, the sense that something more than logic is at work. That maybe, just maybe, the war isn't about winning or losing. It's about reshaping reality, about bending people not through strength, but through absurdity and beauty, and a little bit of wine-induced madness. You find Dionysus again just before dawn. He's sitting in the temple now. His temple, built hastily, out of drapes and gold-painted logs. You missed the best part, you tell him. He smiles, still not quite awake. No, he says. You saw it. That's better. And then he yawns, leans back against a pillow made of peacock feathers, and closes his eyes once more. Apparently, another nap is in order. The morning after a Dionysian siege feels like waking up in the aftermath of a music festival, and a myth colliding. You blink into a sky that's far too bright, squinting at a battlefield that now smells like rosewater and roasted dates. Somewhere, a satyr is snoring into a pile of costume jewelry. A maenad is trying to convince a goat to wear earrings. No one's fighting. No one seems to remember they were ever supposed to. The city is technically conquered, but it doesn't feel like a conquest. It feels like the end of a dream. You wander through the city's courtyard, half temple, half theatre now. The locals are dazed, but smiling. One of them offers you a candied fig. Another is handing out carved masks to children. You see city guards still wearing armour, but they're also holding grape clusters and humming. You find the mayor, possibly, wearing a tunic inside out and asking a flute girl if her tiger takes bribes. She says it depends on the grape quality. This is how Dionysus wins. Not with force, with fatigue, with feeling, with spectacle. But where is he? You find him reclining again, of course, on a makeshift chaise constructed from broken siege ladders and silk. A leopard purrs beside him. Someone's massaging his feet with olive oil. He raises his head as you approach and speaks as if mid-sentence. Tell me, was the city beautiful? You nod. They gave up without a fight. He smiles sleepily. They didn't give up. They gave in. And maybe that's the key. Dionysus isn't interested in submission through fear. He seeks surrender through awe, delirium, laughter, through the gentle unraveling of resistance. This isn't war. This is theatre with real stakes. You sit beside him as he sips something, golden from a goblet shaped like a pomegranate. The next town won't be as easy, someone nearby mutters. Dionysus shrugs. Then we'll nap harder. You're not sure what that means. No one is. Later that day, you learn that the army is marching again. Eastward, always eastward, into stranger lands and stranger tales. But this time, there's no map, no clear destination, just a trail of cities softened by song and drunk on myth. As you pack your things, mostly grapes and a pillow someone embroidered with ivy leaves, you overhear two priests discussing logistics. The god will need a fresh fig tree, one says, preferably near a stream. Napping conditions must be divine. You raise an eyebrow, but no one laughs. This is serious. In the army of Dionysus, nap strategy is a real department. You ask, another traveller, a grizzled old woman with vines in her hair and surprisingly sharp elbows, how long she's followed the god. Since Thebes, she says. Back when he was still proving himself. Before the tigers, before India. You blink. He went to Thebes, she laughs bitterly. He destroyed Thebes without lifting a finger. You press her for more, and she tells you one of the earliest Dionysian myths. How he returned to his hometown, unrecognized, scorned. The king, Pentheus, mocked him, called him a fraud, refused the wine. And so, Dionysus did what he always does, nothing. At least, not directly. He whispered to the women, stirred the winds, lit the fire of frenzy. And when Pentheus tried to spy, on the Maenads, Dionysus didn't strike him down. He simply made him visible. The women, lost in ecstatic madness, tore him apart with their bare hands, thinking he was a wild beast. You shiver. It's the first time you've heard a story that isn't funny. That isn't a party trick. Dionysus may be the god of joy, but his joy has edges. His sleep, his wine, his laughter. They're not always gentle. Sometimes they're masks. Sometimes they're traps. Historians still argue whether the Thebes myth was a warning against denying divine ecstasy, or a political metaphor for the danger of ignoring social transformation. Either way, it's clear. Dionysus can be patient, but not forgiving. You look at the god now, dozing again beneath a cherry tree. He doesn't look dangerous. He looks like someone who would sleep through his own trial. But you remember Pentheus. You remember the city that laughed, then burned. The god naps not out of weakness, but out of certainty. He knows the ending. He's already seen it. And then, another call to march. You rise with the rest, falling into rhythm. The music starts. The wineskins are passed. Someone's riding a donkey painted like a zebra. And behind you, Dionysus stirs, yawns, stretches. Where are we headed? Someone asks him. He smiles with closed eyes, toward applause. The road now curls like a lazy serpent along the edge of the foothills. The air feels heavier here, warmer, stickier, like it's waiting for something. The procession moves slowly, feet dragging, songs half-hearted. Even the satyrs are quiet. Today, you pass a man trying to juggle grapes and dropping everyone. A flute girl sighs and throws her instrument into the bushes. Something's off. And then it hits you. The wines run dry. It wasn't supposed to happen. The divine supply was bottomless, supposedly refilling by miracle or by mirage. But today, all the amphorae are empty. The vines are wilting. Even the goat that usually walks around drunk and hiccuping looks sober. You hear murmurs ripple through the camp. This happened once before, someone whispers. Right before the battle of the Whispering Valley. Whispering Valley. The name alone makes your skin itch. A satyr explains with a grimace. It's the place where Dionysus lost his buzz. Where the god, mid-March, suddenly felt tired. Too tired. Wasn't he always tired, you ask? The satyr nods solemnly. Yes, but this time he admitted it. You reach the edge of the valley just as a thick, slow fog begins to creep in. The landscape is strange, flat, pale, the grass whispering as if telling secrets. It's here that the real myth begins to blur with something else, something more human. Dionysus halted his campaign, they say, not because of an army or a plague or a lost bet, but because of exhaustion, deep, soul-crushing, bone-sighing fatigue. The kind that seeps into your chest and tells you, stop, sit, down, enough. He didn't rage. He didn't sing. He curled up beneath a willow tree and fell asleep for 3 full days, 3 days, in the middle of a war. The army waited, unsure whether to press on or return home. And in that pause, in that stillness, they too began to sleep. Maenads curled in piles like kittens. Satyrs wrapped themselves in vines. Even the tigers lay down, heads on their paws, tails twitching in dreams. This was the nap that changed everything. Scholars still debate what it means. Was it a metaphor for burnout? A divine retreat from the absurdity of endless conquest? A protest against the very nature of war? Or was it simply the universe's way of saying even gods get tired. You walk quietly through the fog now. It's hushed here, sacred, and you see them. Sleeping figures preserved like statues. A dancer, mid-pose, curled into herself. A guard, arms around his lyre. A priest with ink stains on his hands, dozing atop a half-written scroll. And in the center, Dionysus, eyes closed, breathing slow, a half-smile on his lips, as if dreaming something beautiful. You crouch beside him and realize he's surrounded by offerings. Not gold or weapons, but soft things. Pillows, silks, feathers, bundles of lavender. Someone has braided grapevines into a crown and placed it gently on his brow. No one dares disturb him, not out of fear, but reverence. This nap, you realize, was no accident. It was ritual, a kind of divine pause, a full-body exhale. And for those 3 days, the world didn't turn. No cities were taken, no enemies were slain, no parties, no madness, just stillness. One priest tells you softly, we called it the hollow, sleep, when even ecstasy needs a silence to echo in. You sit down beside them and close your eyes too, and for a moment you feel it, the weight of it all, the absurdity of marching through deserts and jungles. The joy, yes, but also the ache, the madness and the beauty and the sorrow braided together like wine and water. When Dionysus finally woke, they say he didn't speak. He stood, stretched, and looked east. Then he wept, not from sadness, from release, from the simple pleasure of sleep well slept. He ordered no festival that day, no parade, just a slow march forward, quiet and graceful, like a procession of dreams taking form. You rise as the wind shifts, the fog lifts, the path ahead brightens, and Dionysus, he's already walking, still barefoot, still drowsy-eyed, but steadier now, lighter, like someone who remembered that even the god of madness needs a break from performance. And behind him, the army follows, renewed, not by wine, but by rest. It turns out, the real miracle wasn't the wine, it was the nap. You move forward, not marching so much as drifting, like a leaf caught in the wake of a slowly turning tide. The army of Dionysus has changed. You feel it in the way they walk. Quieter, still barefoot, still humming, but now with a softness that wasn't there before, as if the hollow sleep has pressed pause on their chaos and left behind something gentler, something deeper. They're headed for the jungle of Melia, or so the rumors say. You ask a flute girl what awaits there. She giggles, monkeys with better manners than kings. Not helpful. Another says the jungle is sacred, that the trees whisper secrets, and if you fall asleep beneath one, you wake up fluent in poetry or permanently drunk, sometimes both. You're not sure what to believe anymore, not after watching a god nap a battle into submission. Still, the jungle approaches, thickening with each step. You duck under vines as thick as ropes. Butterflies the size of your hand flutter past. And then, music. Not Dionysian music, something else. Steady, metallic. You creep forward and discover a strange sight. Another army, waiting. They're not locals, nor the kind of enemy you'd expect. Their armor gleams. Their formation is precise. No vines, no laughter. Just cold, quiet readiness. Spears, not flutes. Discipline, not ecstasy. A murmur runs through the ranks of Dionysus's procession. This is the army of King Dariades, they say, a mortal king from the far side of the river Indus. A man who hates gods, especially ones who wear leopard print and throw wine at his gates. You look to Dionysus. He is lying down again. Of course he is. He's arranged himself across 3 cushions, one hand behind his head, the other lazily spinning a pomegranate seed. He looks up at the enemy camp and raises a brow. They're early. he mumbles. A Maenad kneels beside him. Shall we prepare the weapons? Dionysus yawns. Let them come. But they have actual weapons, she whispers. He waves a hand. So do we. You glance around. No one is holding anything sharper than a thyrsos. The satyrs are playing cards with goat droppings. Someone is trying to tame a parrot using raisins. You begin to sweat. And yet, the god doesn't move. This is not bravery. This is something else, something unnerving, a kind of serenity only gods possess. The certainty that the world bends toward them eventually. Still, you prepare. Or at least, you pretend to. Someone hands you a mask. A smooth wooden face painted with a laughing expression. Wear it, they whisper. It helps with the fear. And then it happens. Not a battle, a scene. As the enemy army begins to approach, shields up, spears gleaming, the Dionysian host transforms. They don't form ranks. They dance. They don't shout threats. They sing. Loudly, dissonantly. A Maenad throws a garland of flowers at a charging soldier. He catches it by reflex and freezes. A satyr tumbles through enemy lines and leaves behind. Glitter, confusion, laughter, disorientation. This isn't a clash. It's a collision of logic and dream. The enemy soldiers try to hold formation, but the rhythm gets to them. A few break ranks, stumbling backward, tripping over vines that weren't there a moment ago. One man lowers his sword and begins to clap, dazed. Another sits down and starts crying into his helmet. Then comes the laughter. That strange, infectious, uncontrollable laughter that seems to rise not from joy, but from the crumbling edge of reason. Dionysus finally rises. He walks, forward, barefoot, robes brushing the grass, face unreadable. The enemy stops. He doesn't speak. He doesn't strike. He closes his eyes and naps. Right there, on the battlefield. You stare, stunned, but the effect is immediate. His followers pause too. They sit. They curl up on cloaks and pillows. One satyr snores with heroic force. The enemy doesn't know what to do, and that precisely is the point. Historians still argue whether this moment ever existed, whether Dionysus truly slept in the face of spears and turned a battle into a bizarre theatre of rest. Some claim it's allegory, a warning against rigidity, a hymn to surrender. Others say it never happened. But others? They say there are still places in the East where the vines grow wild in patterns that look like footsteps, where people wear masks and dance instead of fight, where sleep is considered holy. You sit too, mask slipping from your face. The air is warm, fragrant with crushed fruit and sweat, and you realize the war is over. It ended the moment the god stopped performing. There is no resistance when you're not playing the same game. The enemy retreats, not defeated, just undone. And Dionysus, he dreams softly, smiling, because sometimes the loudest victory is a whisper. By now, you've stopped trying to understand the rules, because there are no rules, at least not ones that belong to mortals. You walk beside satyrs who argue about wine temperatures and battlefield etiquette in the same breath. You see Maenads discussing dream interpretation while sharpening thyrsos tips. And somewhere in the distance, Dionysus is napping under a tree again, using what looks like a scroll as a pillow. The last one he dictated, probably. Today's theory floating around. Camp is that Dionysus's army isn't just different, it's high. Not high in the usual divine elation sense. High in the literal, possibly botanical, very possibly fungal sense. You overhear two priests whispering near the incense altar. The ivy crown helps open the third eye, one says, stroking his beard. It also gives me a rash. The other replies, scratching his scalp. Welcome to the world of the first psychedelic army. The theory is controversial. Historians still argue whether the Maenads and satyrs achieved their ecstatic trances through divine possession, or through herbs, mushrooms, and ritual smoke. You suspect both are true, because you've now seen a satyr chew on a leaf, giggle for 10 minutes, and then swear he could see through time, which might explain why he tried to headbutt a sundial. The cult of Dionysus has always been associated with altered states, ecstasis, to stand outside oneself. That's the point of it all. To unhinge, to unmoor, to let the ego dissolve in music and movement and wine until only instinct remains. But in wartime, that's a different kind of madness. You remember stories from earlier of warriors in India struck not by swords, but by visions, of enemies who dropped their weapons and began dancing, tears streaming down their faces, babbling poetry in unknown tongues, of festivals that began as ambushes and ended as initiations. One camp scroll even records this: "He raised no weapon, only a golden cup, and yet the soldiers knelt as if pierced by arrows." A metaphor, maybe, but you saw it yesterday. A line of enemy guards halted by nothing more than laughter and incense, something in the air, something beneath the skin. You stumble into a tent that smells like honey and moss. Inside, a priestess is painting symbols onto a tiger's back. She looks at you, expression unreadable. You haven't dreamed yet, have you? "I've slept," you say. She shakes her head. That's not the same. And before you can ask what she means, she presses a dried leaf into your hand. "Tonight, under the fig tree. Eat this. Lie still." You nod dumbly, back away, and hide the leaf in your sash. Later, around a fire built from sandalwood logs, the flute girls play songs that don't sound like music. They sound like memories, or the dreams of someone who once heard a storm and tried to turn it into melody. You hear laughter, then sobbing, then more laughter. No one minds. Even the god is quiet tonight. You find Dionysus reclining on cushions that smell faintly of myrrh and crushed berries. His face is unreadable, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. "Do you think you'll win?" you ask. He doesn't respond immediately. Then softly, "I'm not at war. But the marching, the cities." He turns to you, lazily. "They're the ones fighting. I'm just reminding them they don't have to." You blink. "By confusing them? By showing them a better madness," he murmurs, and with that, he closes his eyes. You lie down later beneath the fig tree. You chew the leaf. You wait. And suddenly, the world stretches. You are no longer quite you. The stars above shimmer in patterns you've never noticed. You hear music in the rustling leaves, laughter in the wind. Dionysus is everywhere, in the soil, in the song, in your breath. And in that moment you understand why he sleeps. Because the world is already spinning fast enough. Because dreams are where wars are truly undone. Because sometimes the only way to change a mind is to leave it. You awaken hours, later, or maybe days, with soil on your hands and the taste of grapes on your tongue. No one says a word. They've all been dreaming too. And when you rise, the camp is already moving again. Slower, lighter, dreamier. Toward the next city, or the next story, or the next nap. You follow, barefoot, mask in hand. And in the distance, Dionysus hums a lullaby to the sky. The jungle thins. The vines loosen their grip on the path. The canopy opens just enough for moonlight to trickle down in silver threads. And ahead, a strange hush settles over the procession. Not tired, not uncertain, just expectant. You've crossed out of the wildness and into something else, something curated. The next city is visible even before you reach it. Built along terraces carved into the side of a sandstone cliff, it seems to float above the trees, glowing faintly in the twilight like a sleeping ember. This is Telephassa, the city of silence. You hear the name whispered through the ranks. The maenads fall quiet. The satyrs stop joking. Even the flute girls rest their instruments against their hips. No one's entirely sure what happened the last time Dionysus passed this way. But how so? Only story they tell is that he walked in alone and walked out laughing. That's never a comforting myth. This time, though, the god doesn't walk in. He lounges near the rear of the procession, balancing a fig on his forehead and letting it roll back and forth while two tigers fight over a silk pillow at his feet. So, you begin cautiously. Shouldn't you be... Nope. He cuts you off without looking. You're not going to lead the procession? He flips the fig into his mouth, chews thoughtfully. Too noisy. You're Dionysus, and they're already listening, he murmurs. They just don't know it yet. So you walk forward without him. The gate is open. No guards. No music. Just silence. You're not even sure the city is awake. Then, something moves. A woman appears on the terrace above. White robes, no expression. Then another beside her. Then more. Rows and rows of people, all dressed alike, all watching, all perfectly still. You realize too late that this city doesn't speak. They've taken a vow. Some say in reverence, others say in fear. You wave, no reaction. A satyr claps, no response. A Maenad throws a flower petal. The wind catches it. It lands at someone's feet. Still nothing. So, what do you do when the usual chaos doesn't work? You sleep, or rather, pretend to. At first it's a joke. One satyr curls up theatrically on the cobblestones. Then a priestess stretches like a cat and slumps across a bench. A flute girl leans against a pillar and lets her eyes flutter shut. And it spreads. Soon, the entire Dionysian army is dozing, reclining, snoring, dreaming in the middle of the city square. You lie down too, because at this point, it's the only move that makes sense, and something strange happens. The silent citizens blink. One tilts her head, another lowers her arms. You hear the faintest exhale. They've noticed. From your half-lidded gaze, you see it. Curiosity, discomfort, intrigue. For a society defined by quiet order, the sight of hundreds of strangers slumbering in the street is not just odd. It's unbearable. And that's when Dionysus walks in. Not loudly, not dramatically, just barefoot. Robe open, at the chest, eyes puffy from real sleep, dragging a jug of something fragrant in one hand and a pillow in the other. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He lies down in the exact center of the square and lets out a long, satisfied sigh, and the crowd cracks. First, a child giggles, then someone coughs. A foot shuffles, a stifled yawn turns into a laugh, and the silence, like a dam breached by a trickle, collapses. Voices, laughter, questions, tears, a scream, a song. Dionysus doesn't open his eyes, just smirks and rolls onto his side. That night, the city hosts its first festival in generations. You dance in a courtyard filled with lamps and fruit and masks, and music that feels like it's been bottled up for centuries. People cry as they speak again. They whisper to loved ones. They sing lullabies to no one in particular. It is somehow louder than any battle. Historians still argue whether the story of Telephassa is real, whether a whole city once swore off speech and was undone by a god's nap. Some say the silence was never real, just a metaphor for repression. Others argue it's the perfect case study of Dionysian disruption, not through violence, but through vulnerability. Because that's what sleep is, isn't it? A surrender, a trust, a tiny death in which the soul might wake up better than it was before. You leave Telephassa not with spoils, but with stories. Your pack smells like roasted plums and old incense. There's a new softness in the way the Maenads walk, a new brightness behind the flute girl's eyes, and Dionysus, he sleeps again, this time in a hammock strung between two elephants, because some gods don't need thrones, just shade and a breeze, and the knowledge that while others build armies, he builds awakenings. The road beyond Telephassa isn't really a road anymore. It's more like a suggestion, a meandering ribbon of trampled grass, crushed figs, and sandal prints veering through landscapes that look like they were sketched during a fever dream. Trees, that bloom with two different seasons at once. Rivers that hum low melodies if you wade in up to your knees. You spot a cloud shaped exactly like a laughing satyr, and someone swears it's been following them since last Tuesday. The army is slower now, not from exhaustion, but from soaking in something unnamed, like the air itself has become wine-tinged. Laughter has gotten lazier. Songs loop and change verses at random. It's less of a march now, more of a procession of sleepwalkers, beautiful, dusty, mildly hungover sleepwalkers. You pass a grove where someone planted fennel staffs like trees. They've sprouted. You pass a village where the people greet Dionysus with a banner that reads, "Thank you for the dreams." No, one remembers who taught them that. But even in this strange rhythm, one ritual never changes. The parade. Every few days, no matter where they are, the Dionysian army stops and puts on a show. It's never the same twice. One day, it's theatre, with satyrs reenacting the moment Dionysus allegedly turned a pirate crew into dolphins. Another day, it's a game of catch the drunk oracle, who keeps tripping over vines while delivering rhyming prophecies. Sometimes, it's just a dance, wild and wordless and barefoot under the moon. But today it's chariots, confetti, and chaos. You find yourself roped into preparations before you can protest. Someone throws a leopard print cloak over your shoulders. Another paints a crescent moon on your forehead, using something that smells suspiciously like olive oil and cinnamon. A Maenad sticks feathers behind your ears and says, "You're the moon." You blink. "The moon?" She nods. Tonight's theme is the sky falls in love with the forest. Of course it is. The parade begins at twilight. Torches line the hills. Flute girls lead the charge, faces painted gold. Satyrs somersault down slopes and collide with fruit carts. There are juggling routines, shadow plays, and a team of dancers pretending to be a very enthusiastic thunderstorm. The crowd, whoever they are, wherever they came from, claps in awe. Because that's the point. Dionysus doesn't conquer cities anymore. He enchants them. And then he leaves behind stories that will confuse historians for millennia. You ride a chariot made of woven vines and old wine barrels. Your job, apparently, is to wave at people like you're made of starlight. You try. It's difficult when the satyr driving keeps steering with his elbows. Behind you, one of Dionysus's high priests declares that the war is already over, that no one noticed, because ecstasy is a kind of ending. That when people laugh hard enough, they forget what they were angry about. He delivers this entire speech while standing on a barrel, holding a melon, and wearing nothing but an ivy crown. Historians still debate whether this parade tradition was literal or symbolic. Was it meant to convert the locals into cult followers, distract enemy scouts, or simply amuse the god? Maybe all three. But there's no denying the effect. Wherever they go, people join, even those who say they won't, even those who lock their doors. No one resists forever, not when the enemy arrives in song, wearing masks and smelling like roasted chestnuts and lilac. Not when the war looks like a wedding between chaos and joy. You find Dionysus at the back of the parade. He's not riding, not marching, just strolling, barefoot, drinking something from a clay mug shaped like a lion's paw. "Good turnout tonight," you say. He nods. The trees clapped. You don't ask what that means. Do you even remember why you started this war? You ask quietly. He pauses, looks up at the stars, then shrugs. "They were too serious," he says. "I just wanted to remind them." Of what? That joy exists. You nod. It sounds simple, too simple. But then, a goat dressed as a cloud tumbles past, and a toddler hands you a fig, and someone begins singing an improvised lullaby about falling in love with a thunderstorm. And you think maybe that's the point, because the parade doesn't end. It simply wanders off into the night, trailing music and laughter and dreams. And, somewhere along the way, you realize the battle never started. The only thing Dionysus ever fought was forgetting and sleep. Sleep is the gift he gives when there are no more words. You wake to the sound of hooves. Not the clattering kind. These are soft, deliberate, almost polite. You blink into the morning haze and see a creature you're not entirely sure exists. A war elephant with gold-plated tusks and a garland of marigolds around its neck. On its back sits a boy, no older than 10, playing a reed flute with such focus that the elephant sways with the tune. You rub your eyes. The boy waves. Dionysus, sprawled in a hammock between 2 acacia trees, doesn't move. His hand dangles lazily over the edge, wine sloshing in his cup. He's either half awake or mid-dream, possibly both. The elephant approaches and lets out a sound that's half trumpet, half sigh. It plops down beside the god with surprising grace for something that weighs as much as a ship. Someone from the camp whispers, "That's the wine elephant." You turn. "The what?" They nod solemnly. "It joined us after the siege of Harvetta, got into the god's supply, never left." You watch as the beast gently noses a fruit basket closer to Dionysus. The god lifts a fig to the elephant's mouth. It accepts it delicately. Now you've seen everything. This is the part of the campaign scholars rarely talk about, the animals. Dionysus doesn't just attract humans. His army includes panthers, birds, snakes, and, yes, elephants. Some say he speaks their language. Others say animals recognize madness in its purest, most sacred form. You remember a story told around the campfires of a panther who lay across the chest of a sleeping Dionysus during a battle. No one dared move it. The enemy saw it from a distance and assumed the god had tamed death itself. Were they wrong? You walk past a goat wearing a necklace of glass beads. It sneezes rhythmically. A tiger nuzzles a Maynard's ankle like a house cat. Birds seem to follow the priestesses, landing on shoulders and sipping from wine cups. This is not a war camp. It's a mobile myth, and the line between story and strategy has long since vanished. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of animals was ceremonial or practical. Were they symbols of nature's wildness, divine mascots, or just particularly charismatic wildlife drawn to the scent of fermented grapes? Some say the wine elephant is metaphor, a stand-in for foreign allies who joined Dionysus' campaign. Others insist it was real, that it drank wine, refused to leave, and could knock down gates with a trunk-assisted pirouette. You choose to believe all of it, because the moment you start questioning the logic of a war fought by flute players and goats in makeup is the moment you've already lost the thread. The parade moves on, and now the elephant walks in front. At first it's funny, watching a massive creature covered in silk and bells tiptoe through a field of sunflowers. But soon, the atmosphere shifts. People cheer, children throw garlands, and Dionysus, ever the opportunist, turns it into theatre. He declares the elephant a general, names it Archon of Ambrosia. The satyrs salute with absurd seriousness. One even writes a poem in its honor. To the beast that drinks dreams and steps like dawn, our hearts, our grapes, our gates be drawn. You can't tell if it's meant to rhyme. No one cares, because that's the genius of it all. While other generals calculate troop formations and siege weapons, Dionysus redefines victory. He creates moments, unforgettable, baffling, enchanting. And in doing so, he builds loyalty stronger than fear. You glance back and see a group of villagers joining the procession. One carries a chicken under each arm, another brings a goat with a crown. Even the animals are choosing sides now. And why wouldn't they? Here, war doesn't look like fire and death. It looks like dancing elephants and gods who nap beneath fig trees. You turn to a priestess walking beside you. "Where are we heading next?" She smiles. "Wherever the elephant goes. Simple as that. You follow. And with each step, you begin to understand something deeper, something the god never says aloud, but always performs. That control is an illusion, that when you let go, when you laugh, when you nap in the middle of the madness, the world reshapes around you. You glance at Dionysus, now riding the elephant's back like a half-asleep prince of dreams. He doesn't look like a conqueror. He looks like someone who has already won, because everyone else is still trying to figure out the rules. And the elephant? It sways gently, trumpets once, and leads the way. The scrolls never tell you how war smells. Not the blood and ash kind, everyone knows that one. But this war, the Dionysian kind. It smells like cinnamon crushed underfoot, like overripe grapes in sunlight, like sweat and perfume and fresh cut, lavender, like confusion and warmth. Like something ancient you once forgot, but suddenly remember in a dream. This isn't battle. This is theatre. And yet, cities keep falling. The next city is Kitharos. Not large, not proud, just stubborn. Stone, walls, narrow gates, a guard at every post. They've heard the rumours. They've seen the strange army approaching, barefoot, laughing, dancing, trailing perfume like smoke. And they've decided, not here, not this time. So they close their gates and wait. Dionysus does not send a messenger. He sends a play. Literally. That evening, the army pitches no tents. Instead, they build a stage. Rough planks, draped silks, torches flickering. By nightfall, a full production begins. A tragedy, supposedly. Something about a king who tries to forbid joy and ends up turned into a grapevine. The crowd on the city walls watches silently at first, suspicious, then confused, then something else. You see it happen. A smirk, a stifled laugh, a guard nudging another. By the time Act 3 begins, with a chorus of satyrs performing synchronized cartwheels while weeping dramatically into wine cups, it's over. The walls don't fall. They open. The gates creak wide. A boy runs out barefoot, offering a cup. Behind him, townspeople spill forth, tentative, curious, already smiling. And Dionysus, still asleep. He wakes mid-festival, yawns, blinks at the lights and asks, "Did we win?" No one answers, because the question makes no sense. This is the battle tactic historians hate most, victory through vibes. They argue about it constantly. 1. School says the Dionysian campaign was an allegory for the spread of cultural transformation, that his conquests represent psychological surrender, an embrace of art, wine, ritual, and release. Another says it was just an elaborate initiation rite that grew out of hand. A third group insists none of it happened, that it's all metaphor, wrapped in exaggeration, wrapped in a good party. But the locals of Kitharos, they don't care. They're dancing, wearing masks, chanting new songs. By dawn, their high priest has rewritten the town's founding myth to include Dionysus. By noon, their market stalls are renamed after satyrs. By nightfall, their children are learning to juggle figs. And what did Dionysus do to earn this? He napped through most of it. That's the part that gets you. He didn't threaten. He didn't bribe. He didn't even show up on time. He slept, in full view of everyone. And somehow, that was enough. The scholars who believe in symbolism call it a divine refusal. A god saying, "I do not need to perform for power. My presence is enough. My absence too." The more practical scholars just sigh and say, "Look, it worked." You find yourself in a courtyard the next day, helping a flute girl string ivy around a statue that may or may not be Dionysus. She pauses and asks, "Did we actually take the city?" You shrug. "Does it matter?" She laughs. "Only if we have to leave it." But you don't. Not yet. You stay for 2 nights, maybe 3. Time gets loose in Dionysian company. Days overlap. Afternoons feel like early morning. People nap in fountains. A satyr opens a cafe inside a wine barrel and declares himself mayor of New Kitharos. It sticks. Even the wine elephant gets a mural. You find Dionysus on the rooftop of a temple that now smells like rosemary and oranges. He's lying back, one arm flopped over his eyes, Long day, you ask. Long century, he mutters. Are we moving on soon? He sighs. Eventually. You sit beside him. Below, the city glows with torchlight and laughter. The war is still happening technically, but no one's quite sure where anymore. Maybe that's the real trick. To stretch a campaign so thin and so strange that even war forgets its own shape, and in its place, stories of a god who napped through battles, laughed through sieges, rode tigers and charmed cities with flute solos. And now he's asleep again, because that's all part of the plan. This morning, you're awakened not by drums or flutes, or even a snoring satyr, but by arguing philosophers. It's not an everyday occurrence in the Dionysian camp, which typically prefers dancing to dialectics. But today, 3 travelling scholars have arrived from the east. Tall hats, longer scrolls, very serious faces. They claim they've been following Dionysus's campaign, not to join it, but to analyse it. You watch from behind a basket of figs as one of them jabs a finger in the air, pacing in a circle of dust and spilled wine. This is not war, he declares. This is an elaborate metaphor. Another scoffs. No, it's a ritual procession masquerading as mythic reenactment. You can't conquer a city by napping on its steps. A third mutters, but he did. They fall silent as Dionysus strolls by barefoot. Breezy. A crown of marigolds slightly askew on his head. He pauses beside them, glances down at a scroll covered in footnotes and asks, "Did you bring any olives?" They stare. He walks on. Because to Dionysus, the question is never what does it mean, but rather, how does it feel? He doesn't care about academic framing. He doesn't need to, because the impact is real. Case in point, the next city doesn't. Even resist, you haven't reached it yet. It's still a day's walk away, but its mayor shows up on the trail, panting, red-faced, holding out a large basket of offerings and a handwritten invitation. Please come, we already decorated. Dionysus reads it, nods, and promptly lies down under a tamarind tree. We'll go in the morning, he says, eyes already drifting shut. Someone else will handle the parade. The flute girls are already rehearsing. A satyr is tying bells to a goat. You lie back beside a pile of grapes and feel the world tilt gently into absurdity again. Because now, cities are asking to be conquered, not because of fear, because of FOMO. They want the laughter, the wine, the dreamlike retelling of their own origin story. They want to say, yes, we too were visited by the god who naps beneath fig trees and wakes only to smile. The scholars, predictably, are losing their minds. This defies logic, one of them moans, which is, of course, the point. The Dionysian campaign is not about order. It's about unraveling, not about strategy, but sensation. Where other generals build empires, Dionysus builds myths, and myths are more contagious than swords. That evening, you help prepare a feast, not for celebration, for confusion. Every dish is intentionally mislabeled. Grapes are served in soup bowls. Bread floats in honeyed wine. There's a musical performance where the instruments are played backwards, and the people love it. Because disorientation, here, is divine. Historians still argue whether these surreal events served any tactical purpose. Some suggest they were meant to destabilize and seduce. Others say they were spiritual challenges, designed to loosen the grip of reality so the spirit could move more freely. You think maybe both are true. You find Dionysus near the edge of the camp, gazing at the stars, sipping something dark and glittering from a shell. Why do they keep joining you, you ask? Why not resist? He looks at you with that maddening half-smile. Because I don't take. I invite. You blink. Even when you invade? He shrugs. A good invitation is hard to refuse. And just then, you understand something that not even the scholars can explain. Dionysus doesn't conquer people. He converts their resistance into participation. He doesn't crush opposition. He dissolves it in joy. And the nap is part of the spell. Because when a god sleeps in your streets, you don't feel terror. You feel chosen. The city you reach the next day greets you with flowers, trumpets, and a mural of Dionysus mid-snore, reclining on a cloud of pillows. He looks at it, tilts his head. "I don't snore," he says, mock offended. A Maenad pats his shoulder. It's artistic license, and the whole army laughs. The war, if it ever existed, is long gone. What remains is pilgrimage, performance, and the promise that somewhere out there, a god is dreaming of your city next. The sun hangs low over the fields like a drowsy eye, half shut and golden. You're walking again, but it feels less like a march and more like drifting downstream on a river of sound and velvet dust. The laughter has softened. The chaos simmers, now warmer, deeper, humming just beneath the surface like a bass note held forever. That's when you reach the village of Virion, a small place, modest walls, quiet people, the kind who till the soil with hands that remember every drought. You expect the usual pattern: resistance, confusion, acceptance, festival. But this time, it doesn't play out like that, because this time, Dionysus doesn't bring wine, he brings dance. You don't know where the drums come from, they just start. A heartbeat in the dust, the pulse of something older than any script. The Maenads feel it first. Their eyes shift, their spines lengthen, their feet find the rhythm before thought can interrupt. They move, then the satyrs, then the flute girls, weaving in and out of the growing spiral of movement. Soon, even the goats are keeping time. And you're pulled into it before you realize. Your feet move without permission. Your arms lift. The beat enters your ribs like a second breath. The villagers watch from behind their shutters, uncertain, suspicious, until a child runs out and spins in circles with a grin so wide you feel your heart ache a little. Then another. An old man limps forward, places his walking stick down, and begins to sway. A woman who hasn't spoken in years lets out a laugh so wild it startles the birds from the trees. And then, everyone dances. No songs, no instruction. Just instinct and motion and dust rising like incense. Dionysus appears in the center, not as a god, but as a rhythm given flesh. He doesn't speak, he doesn't sing. He just moves, like water made of laughter and starlight. And the village moves with him. Historians don't write about this moment. They prefer sieges, walls, treaties. But this is how Virion was taken. Not with force, with surrender to joy. The villagers collapse with the rest of you as the sun finally sets. Not defeated, just loosened, unknotted. And Dionysus, he collapses too, arms out, face turned to the sky, laughing like a boy who tricked the stars into smiling back. You lie beside him, chest heaving, eyes damp from something you can't name. "Why dance?" you ask quietly. He turns his head, breathless, eyes glowing. Because when words fail, the body still remembers. You stay in Virion for 3 nights. No festival, just music, just motion, just soft naps in sun-warmed meadows and whispered dreams under wide skies. You begin to notice something. Else the army is changing, not shrinking, but melting. Some followers stay behind. Others wander off to start new songs in new towns. The tigers disappear one morning, without sound, their paw prints filled in by morning rain. The elephant remains. Of course it does. It's far too attached to the fig baskets. Dionysus doesn't stop them. He doesn't hold anyone to oath or obligation. He simply smiles and waves as they go. "Will we run out of people?" you ask. He lifts a fig to his mouth, bites it, chews. "No," he says. "There are always more who need reminding." Reminding. Of what? That life is more than survival. It's more than walls and gates. It's rhythm and rest, dance and dreams. You don't press further. You just walk. And in the fading glow of Virion, you realize something you hadn't before. Dionysus isn't just moving across land. He's moving through people, changing the way they breathe. And when the god naps in your village, he leaves behind something permanent. Not banners or statues, but memory. Memory that says, you danced once. You forgot your name and remembered your soul. And once that happens, you're never the same again. There's something poetic about the way Dionysus disappears. He doesn't vanish in a flash of lightning or rise on a golden cloud. He simply wanders off mid-conversation, usually barefoot, possibly humming, occasionally following a butterfly. One moment he's there, half asleep in a hammock, fig in hand, and the next, someone blinks and says, "Wait, where did he go?" And this time, he disappears mid-siege. Not that it was a particularly violent siege. The city, Amberos, had politely declined entrance. No dramatic threats, just a firm no thank you, written on a tablet and dropped over the wall. Dionysus read it, smiled, yawned. Then, gone. The camp panicked. Quietly, of course, the Dionysian army doesn't scream. It frets in lyrical riddles. The raised god has vanished. Maybe he's a fig now. Or a dream walking in disguise. The Maenads search the woods. The satyrs hold a very intense meeting and conclude he must have slipped into a stream and become a fish. One tries to fish him out using grapes as bait. You just sit on a rock and wait, because this has happened before. The missing god maneuver, they call it now. And somehow, every time he leaves, something unexplainable unfolds in his absence. This time, it begins with a fig tree. You find it growing just beyond the city walls, fresh, unexpected, definitely not there yesterday. Beneath it, a soft patch of moss, a wineskin, a single sandal. The message is clear. Dionysus is resting, not inside the camp, not inside the city, just between. And the army does what it always does when he's gone. It performs. The priestesses organize a ritual, not to summon him back, but to honor the pause. They call it the vigil of absence. You light candles. You sing songs with no words. Someone plays a flute made of hollowed reeds, and the sound it makes feels like memory and mist. Meanwhile, the city of Amberos watches, from behind its walls, from its towers, from its hearts, which you swear are beginning to beat in time with the drums. You don't ask them to open the gates. You just exist, drowsy and devoted and inexplicably joyful in their view. And after 2 days, a miracle occurs. They send a pillow, not a message, not an envoy. A single pillow, embroidered with ivy, left just outside the gate. An invitation. Dionysus still doesn't return. But the gates open anyway. The people of Amberos step through, barefoot, cautious, blinking against the light and music, and scent of cloves. They kneel beside the fig tree. Some nap beside the sandal. A child offers a garland to the tree itself, and suddenly, everyone is dreaming. Historians don't know what to do with this one. The story is too ridiculous, too metaphorical. The god vanished, the city surrendered to a pillow, and everyone fell asleep together in a field. That's not conquest. That's poetry, which is why the academic papers avoid Amberos. Too soft, too strange, but in your bones, you know it was real. Because you felt it, the ache of absence, the miracle of rest, the quiet victory that doesn't look like a flag planted, but like 2 hands clasped in a shared silence. On the 3rd day, Dionysus returns, not with trumpets, just a breeze. You look up and there he is, under the fig tree, nibbling on honeyed nuts and watching birds circle overhead. Was it peaceful? He asks. You nod. They offered a pillow. He smiles, drowsily. I knew they would. You sit beside him. A satyr snores gently in the grass. A flute girl hums a lullaby no one taught her. And as you close your eyes beneath the tree, you realize something strange. The war didn't pause when Dionysus disappeared. It continued through stillness. Because his absence too, is part of the dance, and every time he drifts away, it's to teach you this. That silence is not failure, that rest is not retreat, that sometimes the greatest act of power is to lie beneath a tree and trust that joy will carry the story forward without you. It begins with laughter, not the usual Dionysian kind, bubbly, carefree, possibly fig-induced, but something sharper, stranger, a little too loud for the moment. You're gathering firewood near the edge of the camp when it erupts from the trees, high-pitched, almost mocking. Then more voices join, unfamiliar, offbeat. You step toward the sound cautiously and spot them, a group of figures clad in mismatched armor and cloaks of bright colors, painted faces, oversized smiles, bells on their belts. Some are carrying masks, others are wearing them backwards. One of them sees you, points, and burps loudly. The rest collapse in fits of hysterics. You've just been ambushed by a troupe of wandering jesters. Only they're not just performers. They're the echo laughers. No one knows where they came from. Maybe they followed the Dionysian army from an earlier city. Maybe they crawled out of a dream Dionysus once forgot to finish. What's clear is this: they've come to join the war, with comedy. You return to camp and report the encounter. A priestess sighs. Them again? A satyr shrugs. They mean well. You ask, are they dangerous? The flute girl next to you smirks. Not unless you fear being mocked into madness. By nightfall, they've set up their own stage in the center of the procession, directly next to the temple tent, and they begin their show. It's not good. It's disjointed, loud, and barely comprehensible. One sketch involves impersonating Dionysus as a sleepy cow. Another features a song titled "Ode to the Grape I Dropped and Stepped On." A third is just a man arguing with his own echo. But here's the thing, it works. People laugh. They laugh so hard they cry. They wheeze. They collapse onto the dusty ground, gasping for breath. And then something even stranger happens. The enemy hears it. Yes, an actual enemy encampment, only a ridge away, perched quietly for a planned ambush, suddenly hears a wall of ridiculous, echoing giggles echoing across the hills. Curious, they inch forward, just to look, just to peek, and that's when the Dionysian army makes their move. Not an attack, an invitation. They throw confetti, they toss fruit. One Maenad launches a scroll full of terrible puns over the ridge like a missile. The enemy soldiers catch it, read it, and, after a stunned silence, giggle. And that's all it takes. Confusion, contagious amusement, laughter as a tactical wedge. Soon the enemy's formation is a mess. Helmets are off, swords sheathed. One commander is clapping in time with a very off-key serenade about a drunk olive who just wants to be loved. Historians never agree on this incident. Some call it the most ridiculous surrender in recorded myth. Others say it's apocryphal, made up by a Dionysian cult centuries later. But those who believe know the truth, that Dionysus's army ambushed with absurdity, that they turned a potential slaughter into slapstick, that masks, noise, and laughter became weapons more powerful than any blade. Dionysus, for his part, never even looked up from his nap. When told of the surrender, he mumbled something about timing being everything and rolled over. Later that night, the echo laughers perform again. This time, the former. Enemies sit in the front row. One even joins the troupe, performing a pantomime of his own failed ambush that brings the house down. You sit at the edge of the crowd, stunned. Because this is the lesson you didn't expect. It's not just that joy defeats fear, it's that ridicule disarms aggression. No, one can keep a sword raised while snorting through a pun. You glance toward Dionysus, now curled up beside a wineskin the size of a donkey, quietly snoring, and you think he knew this would happen, because madness isn't always fury. Sometimes, it's a joke delivered at just the right pitch, in just the right moment, to unravel everything the world thinks it understands about power. The next day, the enemy camp is empty, not abandoned, integrated. Their banners are now stage curtains, their soldiers, stagehands, their leader, practicing a cartwheel. The war continues in theory, but you're starting to see it more clearly now. It's not a conflict, it's a performance. And Dionysus, he's the only general who wins by making everyone forget they were ever at war in the first place. You wake to music, again. But this time, it's different. Not flutes, not laughter, not the sleepy, meandering lull of a Dionysian morning. This is sharper, slower, ceremonial. You pull yourself from your pile of satyr-woven blankets and peek beyond the tent flap. There, just past the dewy field and fig trees, a procession winds toward the camp, but not Dionysus's kind. No masks, no glitter, no goat wearing sandals. These are priests, real priests, dressed in white and gold, silent as shadows, faces veiled, feet moving in perfect synchronization. You feel the mood shift across the camp like a gust of cold wind. Even the maenads pause. The flute girls stop mid-song. The satyrs blink and for once do not make a joke. You whisper to the nearest priestess, "Who are they?" She doesn't look at you. "The initiates of Samos." You nod slowly, pretending that means something. "They're real cult priests," she adds. "Structured, sober, extremely clean." "Oh," you say. "So, the opposite of us?" "Exactly. They've come apparently to talk." Their leader steps forward, tall, gaunt, absolutely no sense of humor, visible anywhere on his body. He carries a scroll as long as a man is tall, sealed in wax shaped like a laurel leaf. He speaks without emotion. The Council of Sacred Rites demands audience with Dionysus. A satyr mumbles, "He's napping." The man blinks. Once. "We will wait." And so they do. For 7 hours. Standing perfectly still in the midday heat while Dionysus reclines under a citrus tree, wearing nothing but a silk scarf and one sandal, snoring softly. The initiates do not fidget, they do not sweat, they just stand. When the god finally wakes, he doesn't sit up. He just lifts his head slightly, peering at the visiting priests like someone trying to guess if they're part of a dream. "You wanted an audience," he says. "Here it is." The leader of the initiates approaches. He bows, then unrolls the scroll. It's a list, a long one, of grievances. Apparently, the Dionysian campaign has offended the sacred order of rituals. Improvised festivals, unsanctioned ecstatic rites, untrained, flute players summoning wild animals. Unacceptable deviations, they say. Dionysus listens quietly, picking at a fig with his thumbnail. The list ends with a formal request. Cease all unauthorized ceremonies at once. There's a long silence. And then Dionysus laughs. Soft at first, then louder, then uncontrollably. He rolls onto his back, tears in his eyes, chest heaving with each breathless giggle. The initiates do not react. When he finally calms down, Dionysus props himself up on one elbow. "You traveled all this way," he says, "to stop a dream?" The leader blinks. "We traveled to protect sacred form." "But I am the form," Dionysus replies. He gestures to the vines curling through the camp, the masked children skipping past, the tiger purring beside a barrel of wine. This is the rite. You just don't like how it dances. Historians love this scene. It appears in at least 3 versions of the myth, each slightly different. In one, Dionysus turns the scroll into a bird and it flies away. In another, he invites the initiates to a feast and they fall into a trance and never leave. The most extreme version claims he turns them all into statues and arranges them around his camp like fancy coat racks. What actually happened? You're not sure, but you know this. By evening, the initiates are gone. One of their robes was left behind, neatly folded, with a note tucked inside. Perhaps the form is the forgetting. The Dionysian army resumes its revelry. But the event leaves a ripple, because now the cult is aware of itself, not just as followers of a dream, but as a threat to tradition. And with that awareness comes power. You sit by the fire that night, watching a satyr and a flute girl choreograph a performance called The Scroll That Got Away. It's ridiculous. It's brilliant. And it reminds you why Dionysus doesn't follow rules. Because rules aren't meant to be worshipped. They're meant to be broken beautifully. Sleep comes slowly, humming in your bones, and just before you drift off, you hear the god whisper to no one in particular. They wanted control. I gave them rhythm. Tonight, the air is thick with incense and expectation. It starts as a whisper, passed from satyr to priestess, from flute girl to fig seller, until it wraps itself around the entire Dionysian camp like ivy curling around a column. Fear the flute girl. You laugh when you hear it. Because honestly, how could anyone fear the flute girls? They're the heartbeat of the parade, joyful, elegant. Their songs could make tigers dance and children nap. You've seen them turn awkward silences into celebrations with 3 notes and a wink. But tonight, something shifts. It begins during rehearsal. One of the flute girls, Thalia, the quiet one, plays a tune no one recognizes. A soft, dissonant melody that seems to climb up your spine and whisper directly to your brain. The moment she finishes, the fire nearest the stage flickers, then flares. A gust of wind blows out every torch. No one speaks. Even Dionysus blinks. And he doesn't blink, often. Later, around the campfire, a satyr explains in a hushed voice, "They're not just musicians." Not really. You raise an eyebrow. They're mood weavers, rhythm benders. That tune she played? It's only used when the god is preparing something serious. Like what? He leans closer, voice low. Like waking people up. But we're always waking people up, you say. The satyr shakes his head. No, this is different. This time, we're waking the ones who don't want to be awake. The next day, the army approaches a city named Salpessa, a fortress city, grey stone, narrow windows, no music, no colours. The banners are blank, just white cloth flapping in the wind, as if even symbols were considered too indulgent. They do not send messengers. They do not shout from the walls. They simply close the gates and, wait, the Dionysian camp sets up without a fuss. There's no performance this time. No parade, no jokes, just silence. And then, at twilight, Thalia stands. She walks forward, alone, flute in hand. Dionysus watches her go. He says nothing, just leans back and exhales. You follow at a distance, heart pounding. Thalia reaches the city gate and begins to play. The melody is simple. 3 notes repeated. But something in the tone makes your bones ache. It's not sad. It's empty, like remembering a dream you didn't want to have. Inside the city, you see movement. People clutch their heads. A guard drops his spear and weeps silently. A child runs to the wall, presses her cheek to the stone, and whispers something no one can hear. The tune continues. Longer, deeper. It twists in the air like smoke. And then, the city gate opens. Slowly, without a sound. And the people of Salpessa come out. Not dancing, not laughing, but walking, eyes wide, faces blank, like sleepwalkers. At dawn, they move toward Thalia, kneel, not in worship, in relief. Later, one woman tells you, "We forgot how to feel." That song, whatever it was, it cracked something open. Historians are fascinated by this event. They call it the unweeping. They argue whether it was hypnosis, mass hysteria, or mythologized propaganda. Some believe Thalia's flute was made from the bone of a forgotten god. Others think the melody was stolen from a lost temple that only sings to the brave. But the Dionysian cult, they just nod and say, that's what the flute girls are for. That night, the city joins the camp, in complete silence, no celebration, just presence, the sound of breathing, the hush of night. Dionysus raises a toast with empty hands. And still, everyone understands. Because sometimes joy doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers through wounds. You sit by Thalia at the edge of the fire. She looks tired. More tired than you've ever seen her. You offer her a fig. She smiles. You okay? You ask. She nods. I just don't like using that song. What was it? She hesitates, then answers. The first lullaby. You don't ask what that means. You just sit in the quiet and realize that fear in the Dionysian army isn't about monsters or madness. It's about the ones who can reach into you with a single note and remind you that you've been asleep for too long. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, the camp doesn't dance. Not because it's tired, not because they've run out of wine or stories or willing satyrs to leap through hoops of fire, but because the god has gone quiet, not absent, not asleep, just quiet. You feel it in the air, heavy and still. A kind of silence that doesn't beg to be broken, but studied. Like a dream you haven't stepped into yet. The maenads are subdued, sitting in clusters, braiding vines into each other's hair. The flute girls polish their instruments but don't lift them to their lips. Even the tigers are curled up in a tight circle near the fig trees, twitching gently in sleep. Something's coming, and it has to do with divine sleep. A priestess approaches you without speaking and places a soft bundle in your hands. It's a scroll, ancient, brittle, sealed with wax, shaped like a sleeping eye. You open it slowly. Inside is a single line. When the gods sleep, the world rearranges itself. You look up, and she's already gone. No one says it out loud, but everyone's thinking it. This nap is different. Because Dionysus is not in his usual fig-shaded nook or lounging on a tiger's belly. He's deeper this time. Gone into the dream. Nap, it's rare, it's sacred, it's dangerous. The legends say that when Dionysus truly sleeps, not just dozes, not just lounges, but surrenders. His dreams seep into the world. They shape rivers, tilt stars, unravel kings, and right now, he's in it. You see him lying at the center of the camp, surrounded by petals, masks, and bowls of steaming herbs. His chest rises slowly. His face is serene. His fingers twitch as if grasping invisible vines. No, one approaches, not even the elephants. You ask a priestess, what happens if we wake him too early? She doesn't blink. The world might forget it exists. You're not sure if she's joking. You sit beside a brazier filled with burning cloves and rosemary and listen to the camp whisper around you. Stories float through the smoke. Of the last time the dream nap occurred, years ago, or maybe centuries, the god slept beneath a banyan tree. When he woke, the mountain behind him had changed shape. A village forgot its name. A river began to flow in reverse for a week. His dreams are not like ours, someone murmurs. They dream us. You shiver. And then something shifts. You don't hear it. You feel it. Like a great yawn beneath the surface of the earth. And suddenly, people begin to move. Not with intent, with instinct. One maenad takes off her shoes and walks to the edge of the forest, where a tree blooms in fast forward, buds sprouting and opening as she nears. A flute girl begins to hum a melody she's never learned, eyes closed, hands trembling. A satyr writes a poem in a language that doesn't exist, then burns it with a kiss. It's as if Dionysus is dreaming through them. And you? You feel your heartbeat slow, your breath deepen. You lie down without meaning to. The stars above blur into each other, and you swear the sky is smiling. This is not sleep. This is surrender. This is myth becoming. And then, hours later, or maybe days, he wakes. No trumpet, no flash, no choir, just a slow inhale, a stretch, a soft, sleepy smile. You rush to his side, heart pounding. Are you all right? He looks at you like you've just asked whether rain is wet. I was perfect. he says, yawning. And then he stands, and the trees rearrange themselves slightly. You think you imagined it. But then someone gasps, because where? There was once a flat clearing, there's now a hill, and on that hill stands a vine-covered pillar, new, ancient, inexplicable. Dionysus doesn't look back, he simply begins walking. The army follows without question. The dream nap has passed. The world is not the same, and neither are you. The days blur. Not in a lazy, dreamy way like before, but in a way that feels intentional. Like the world is smoothing itself out, rubbing down the sharp corners of reality with each step the god takes. Roads fold into rivers, hills melt into plains. Cities don't wait to be found, they simply appear. You start to wonder, are you walking across a map? Or through a story being written in real time? Because ever since Dionysus woke from the dream nap, the rules have softened. Time, stumbles, space hiccups. You swear you walked the same path twice and arrived somewhere entirely new. One morning, you wake to find your sandals have turned into grapevines. Not metaphorically, literally. They still fit somehow. You decide not to question it. This, apparently, is normal now, and it all begins with the next city. If you can call it a city. It's a theatre, carved into the side of a hill, facing the sea, with marble benches that glow under the sun like the teeth of a sleeping god. There are no homes, no markets, no temples, just the stage. And the people, actors. All of them. Or maybe they've become actors. It's hard to say. You ask one man what he does for a living, and he replies, "Tragedy, Tuesdays, I'm off Wednesdays." You nod, because that makes sense now. The Dionysian army arrives with no plan. Dionysus doesn't even walk in. He's carried in on a prop chariot made of driftwood, wearing a crown of olive pits and a robe stitched together from old scripts. He looks around at the assembled crowd and declares, "Let's do a show." No one asks what kind, they just begin. And you're cast immediately. Your role, the confused traveller who becomes joy. It's a stretch. You stumble through your first scene, trying to deliver your lines between hiccups of laughter. Because here's the thing, the play is about the campaign. And yet, it's not. It's about a god who naps through wars, a city that falls in love with a tiger, a flute girl who opens gates with lullabies, a wine elephant who forgets how to trumpet but remembers how to dance. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. You glance at Dionysus during Act 3. He's off stage, reclining on a curtain rod, mouthing your lines with a sleepy grin. During the final scene, you hold out a fig and whisper, "Maybe peace is just a dream we forgot to believe in." Someone in the audience gasps. Someone else bursts into tears. You bow. They cheer. And then, the curtain doesn't fall, because there is no curtain. The play just becomes reality again. The audience stands, claps, and walks into the camp as if they've always been part of it. The theatre city ceases to exist as a separate space. It folds into the parade. Now everyone is playing a part. The woman who ran the olive stall becomes she who laughs at dawn. The butcher renames himself prop master of fate. Even the mayor hands Dionysus a golden key and says, "This unlocks nothing, but it feels right." Dionysus thanks him and immediately uses it as a hairpin. Historians write little about this place. Some say it was a metaphor for Dionysian mystery rites, a way to initiate followers into a living myth. Others argue it was performance art gone rogue. The most poetic scholars call it the stage of surrender, a space where theatre replaced power and story became law. But you just remember it as the city where everyone remembered they were pretending and chose to keep pretending together. Because sometimes pretending is more powerful than believing. You leave the city with no curtain call, no ending, just a long, slow fade into music. As you walk, you ask Dionysus, "Was that real?" He smirks. "Did it feel real?" "Yes." Then it was. And he hands you a scroll. It's your script. Blank. You carry it with you, knowing the next scene has already begun. ChatGPT said, "The further east you go, the more it feels like the world is bending, not breaking, just gently reshaping itself around Dionysus's footsteps. The mountains seem lower than they should be. The rivers shimmer even under moonlight. You pass trees that bow slightly as the god walks by, like old friends recognizing an even older one. And now, the map, if anyone's still following it, shows you entering a kingdom ruled by a woman named Queen Leonthea. She's famous, but not for beauty or wisdom or cruelty. She's famous for not believing in gods. That's right, not just disbelief, denial, passionate, poetic, well-organized denial. She publishes pamphlets, holds public debates, hosts rationality festivals where people chant slogans like "Emotion is a parasite" and "Wine is not a worldview." Dionysus, when told all of this, hums, then shrugs, then asks if anyone has figs. No one brings them, so he sighs, lies down, and says, "Let her find me then." So you set up camp just outside her capital. No parade, no drums, just quiet. It's unsettling. Everyone's waiting. The satyrs chew grass and stare at the city walls like they're trying to remember why they ever had teeth. The maenads braid and rebraid the same strands of ivy. Even the wine elephant lies flat, trunk flopped over its eyes like it's shielding itself from disappointment. And then she comes, not with guards. Alone. Queen Leonthea rides a chariot drawn by 4 white horses, all in perfect step. She wears no armor, just a cloak embroidered with tiny images of gears and equations. Her crown is a ring of iron set with a single stone, obsidian, sharp as a promise. She does not dismount. She does not blink. She speaks loudly enough for the whole camp to hear. "Show me the god." No one moves. So Dionysus sits up from his nap under a tree and waves lazily. "Hi." She narrows her eyes. "You're the one they call the god of madness." He nods. "Among other things." "I don't believe in you." He shrugs. "Lots of people don't believe in gravity when they're dreaming." She opens her mouth, closes it. Then, after a moment, she steps down from her chariot, walks forward, stops a few feet from him, and says, "Prove it." The camp holds its breath. You expect something big, a transformation, a miracle, something involving grapes and fireworks and a goat that speaks in riddles. But Dionysus just looks at her. "Why?" "Because belief must be earned," she replies. He tilts his head. "Or undone." And then he lies back down, closes his eyes, and naps. That's it. The queen stares. The camp stares. You stare. Nothing happens. Then she does something unthinkable. She waits. She stands there for hours as the god sleeps, arms crossed, fuming silently, like someone told the universe to challenge her, and it had the audacity to bring a pillow. By dusk, she hasn't moved. By midnight, she's still there. By dawn, her crown is tilted, and then, finally, Dionysus wakes. Yawns, sits, up, looks at her, and smiles. "You stayed." "I wanted answers," she says, hoarse. "And I dreamed," she says softly. "But I was awake." He nods. That's usually how it starts. She doesn't speak again. She just walks into the camp, takes off her crown, places it on a satyr's head, and begins dancing, slowly, elegantly, as if she's been doing it her whole life in secret. That night, her capital sends food and flowers and dancers. They rename the central square the Quiet Awakening. Historians call this the surrender. Of logic philosophers write essays trying to explain it. Was it trance? Was it theatre? Was it exhaustion? But the truth is simpler. Sometimes resistance is a performance. And when the curtain falls, when the fig tree casts its shadow, what's left is not belief or disbelief, just relief that something greater than You has invited you to rest. Dionysus doesn't gloat. He naps, because in his world, even victory is a lullaby. At some point, you stop asking where you are. Not because you're lost, though you are, but because the journey has stopped being about location. The land has turned fluid beneath your feet. Villages sprout like mushrooms overnight. Rivers curve in places they didn't exist yesterday. You've begun to suspect that following Dionysus east doesn't mean heading toward a place. It means heading toward a state of being. And now you reach a village that doesn't have a name. You ask, the first woman you see, "What is this place called?" She thinks for a moment, then says, "We haven't decided yet. We were waiting for someone." You blink. "Who?" She points behind you. Dionysus, of course, riding a cart pulled by 2 oxen wearing velvet blindfolds. He's lying on his side, eating a pomegranate with a spoon, one leg swinging idly over the edge. No one bows. No one runs. They just watch. And somehow, that feels more sacred than 1,000 parades. The village has no temple, no palace, no council. It's a scattered cluster of homes, half carved into stone, half grown from willow and reed. There's a stillness here, not cold, not empty, just soft. The god steps off the cart, barefoot, fruit still in hand. He looks around and says, "This place needs a festival." Someone replies, "We've never had one." "Even better," he says. And just like that, the preparations begin. Only, no one knows what kind of festival it's supposed to be. There are no traditions here, no scripts, no ancestors to consult. So, they make it up. You help weave flowers into something that might be a crown. Someone else cooks a stew out of lemons, wine, and something spicy that makes your eyes water just by smelling it. One man walks in slow circles for an hour before deciding. He's the official keeper of the shadows. No one argues. Children run around asking strangers for stories they can turn into songs. It's chaos, but a gentle kind. The night arrives, and so does the celebration, though no one quite agrees on what's being celebrated. Some say it's a harvest. Some say it's a dream. One satyr insists it's the god's birthday, even though Dionysus says, "That can't be right. I'm always being born." There's no stage, no ceremony, just movement, laughter, quiet dancing beneath trees that drop blossoms you're sure weren't there at sunset. Dionysus sits at the center of it all, not presiding, not commanding, just there. The anchor of the madness, the stillness in the storm. And as people sing, spin, and sip from mismatched cups, you realize something subtle but profound. No one's trying to win anything. No one's claiming to be right. It's the opposite of war. It's unwar. Later, you find the god lying on a bed of moss, one hand tucked behind his head, the other lazily sketching circles in the dirt. You sit beside him. He looks at you. Nice festival. "What are we celebrating?" you ask. He shrugs. "The fact that we don't need a reason anymore." That stays with you, because so much of life is built on reasons, rules, rituals, revenge. But here, under stars that blink, like eyelids trying to stay awake, there's a new logic forming, a logic of presence, of permission, of celebration without justification. The village doesn't name itself. Not that night, not ever. And when you leave, it stays the same. Quiet, open, waiting. For someone else to show up and remind them that laughter, sleep, and song are enough. Historians don't even know this place existed. There are no records, no battles, no borders, only a few scattered references in later texts to a nameless village that welcomed the god with no questions. Some dismiss it, some search for it still. But you were there, and you know the truth. That the greatest places are the ones where no one tells you what they are. You just feel it and decide to stay a little longer. You wake to rain, not a storm. Just a gentle, persistent drizzle that seems more curious than wet. The kind that taps on your forehead like a child asking if you're still dreaming. The sky is grey but not gloomy. The camp is quiet but not still. Everyone moves slowly today, as if the god's drowsiness has soaked into their limbs. And Dionysus, he's writing a letter. You didn't know he could write, or would bother, but there he is, seated on a folding stool carved from fig wood, hunched over a piece of bark with a quill made from a crow's feather. What's it say? You ask, careful not to interrupt. He glances up. It says, "Dear mortals, stop making everything so sharp." That's it? For now. You sit beside him. The air smells like damp ivy and forgotten things. Around you, the camp murmurs in half-sentences, unfinished jokes, half-sung lullabies, thoughts that haven't quite found their shape. And then you hear it. New sound. It doesn't belong. It's too crisp, too measured. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Marching. You rise. Beyond the hill, a column appears. Armor gleams through the fog. Shields, banners, formation. The kind of army Dionysus never uses. They are led by a woman in black robes and gold earrings shaped like knives. She carries no sword, just a scroll. Another list, another demand. They call her Thryma, the Law Mother, and she has come to make sense of things. Her message is simple. Enough of this softness. Enough of this myth-making. Return to form. Cease the nonsense. Choose a side. You watch as she reads this aloud to Dionysus. He does not blink. He tears off a piece of fig and chews it slowly, then replies, "No." Thryma frowns. "Then I'll make your people choose." She gestures, and her soldiers unfurl something strange. Mirror, tall, cold, polished bronze. She says, "Let them look. Let them see who they are without your illusions. You're the first to see your reflection, and what stares back isn't frightening, just real. Your face, a little older, a little more tired. None of the vine crowns or paint, just skin and eyes. You turn away first, then others look, one by one. Some weep, some smile, some laugh, like they're remembering something they buried on purpose. And Dionysus, he steps in front of the mirror, looks, then tilts his head. "It's me," he says, softly, but small. Thryma says, "It's the truth." Dionysus places a hand on the glass, and it shatters. Not violently, it just crumbles, like something that was only ever pretending to be solid. He turns to her and says, "We were never hiding from the truth. We were dancing with it." She doesn't respond. She leaves. Her soldiers follow. The pieces of the mirror remain scattered across the ground, catching drops of rain, reflecting sky. You sit down next to a shard. It shows your eye, nothing more, and that's enough. Historians call this moment the cracking of the mirror. They say it marked a turning point, when the campaign stopped being a rebellion and became a philosophy, a way of being, not against logic, not against law, but beyond it. That night, Dionysus writes a second letter. This one he doesn't show anyone. He folds it, tucks it into a crack in the bark of the fig tree he slept under last week. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe they won't. But he doesn't wait for them. He just turns to the camp and says, "Let's walk again." No one asks where. They just go, because by now they know. The path isn't about the next city. It's about the rhythm beneath, your ribs. The one you only hear after everything else has been laughed, sung, wept, and shattered. It happens just after dawn. The sky is pink and lazy, clouds stretched like pulled sugar across the horizon. You're sipping something hot and herbal from a wooden cup, listening to a satyr and a flute girl argue about whether dreams count as memories when the sound begins. A soft hum, not a voice, not a drum, something older. It's coming from the horizon. The air ripples, and then you see them, not soldiers, not dancers, but followers, thousands of them, not marching, drifting, like pollen in the wind, like dandelion seeds pulled by story instead of gravity. They wear mismatched robes and old festival masks. Some ride donkeys decorated in ribbons. Others carry banners made from torn bedsheets scrawled with verses like, "Sleep is truth with the lights off," and "He napped, therefore we are." They call themselves the Dreamwalkers, and they've been following you for weeks, not behind you, ahead, looping in, out, circling the army like a tide. No one told them to come. They just knew. You watch as they pour into the camp, hugging, strangers offering figs, exchanging stories that begin with "I heard" and end with "so I danced." It's overwhelming, wonderful, and a little terrifying, because it means something is about to end, or begin, or both. Even Dionysus looks surprised. He stands barefoot at the edge of the crowd, blinking at the sheer number of faces. He turns to you and says, "I didn't invite them." You smile. Yes, you did. Every time you napped under a fig tree, every time you refused a throne, every time you turned a siege into a stage. He rubs his eyes. Well, that was reckless of me. And then the drums start, but not your drums, theirs. Each group has its own rhythm. Some beat on pots, others clap, stomp, whistle. A few have crafted instruments from gourds and bones and spoons. The sound is chaos, then chorus, then something else. Something, unified, and you realize the dream has become shared, no longer just Dionysus's vision. Now it belongs to everyone, even those who doubted, who laughed, who stayed behind. They're here now too. One carries a scroll from Thrimmer, now repurposed as a kite. Another wears Queen Leonthea's iron crown, now bent into a bracelet. You feel it in your bones. This isn't a parade anymore. It's a pilgrimage. But not toward a temple, toward a transformation. That night, there is no central fire. There are 100, scattered through the field like stars. Each group tells their version of the story. In one, Dionysus turned a river into wine and taught fish to dance. In another, he whispered to the moon and convinced it to nap for 3 days. In yours, he led a war that was never fought, only forgotten. He hears them all, smiling, not correcting. Letting the myth breathe, because that's the final secret, isn't it? That Dionysus doesn't need to win. He needs to be remembered, but not for his face, for his feeling, for the way he made people laugh during sieges, sleep through fear, and dance with their shadows. And as you lie in the grass that night, watching, the stars rearrange themselves into what might be masks, or grapes, or nothing at all. You know what's coming. Tomorrow is the last city, the one no one has ever seen, the one only dreamers find. It has no name, but they say Dionysus built it once, then forgot where he left it. And now it's waiting, not for war, not for tribute, but for a god to arrive barefoot, half asleep, followed by fools and saints and flute girls and wine-drunk elephants, and finally say, "I'm home." You arrive at the final city at sunset, but there are no gates, no walls, no name. It's not even clear when you crossed into it. One moment, you're walking through a field of soft grass and wild mint, and the next, everything feels different. The air tastes like old laughter. The wind sounds like applause. Even the light seems warmer, as if the sun has agreed to hang around just a little longer to see how this ends. The city is not a city. It's a space, a memory waiting to happen. Stone columns wrapped in vines, pools of clear water that reflect. The stars, before the stars, appear. Empty platforms that suggest something should be performed there, but no script waits. This is the city Dionysus forgot, the one he built and then left behind, not out of neglect, but because forgetting is sacred too. You step into the heart of it with the others, the dreamwalkers, the dancers, the satyrs, the priestesses, the elephant, everyone. No one shouts, No one sings, they just begin. Begin what? Everything. One Maenad climbs a column and declares it a tower of memory. A satyr paints his face with mud and calls himself the shadow of the god's first laugh. A child hands you a bowl of honey and says, "We're supposed to remember what we haven't lived yet." You sit on a marble bench and feel like you've been there before, and across the plaza, barefoot, wine-stained, tired in the way only the divine can be, Dionysus walks, not performing, not commanding, just arriving. He reaches the center, turns slowly, and opens his arms, not wide, not dramatically, just enough, and everyone comes to him. They don't kneel, they don't cheer, they just gather. He speaks softly. "So, did we win?" A voice from the back replies, "We didn't fight." Another says, "We remembered." Dionysus smiles. "That's better." And then he lies down. Right there, in the center of the city, the earth hums gently beneath him. Someone covers him with a leopard print blanket. Someone else places a fig in his open hand. The flute girls begin to play, not a song of celebration, but of release, of endings, of easing. The tigers curl around the pillars, the satyrs fall asleep mid-joke, the priestesses fold their robes into pillows, and you lie down too, because it's time. Time for the god to sleep, and for the dream to settle. The sky darkens, but gently, as if even the stars are leaning in close to listen. And now, here in this forgotten city, you feel the full weight of what this journey meant. Not a war, a reminder. That surrender doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes it means letting go. That chaos, when softened by kindness and laughter, becomes ritual. That rest is not the end of action, but its purpose. And as Dionysus' breathing slows, so does the world. The drums have stopped, the flutes have quieted. Even the wind, once playful and full of questions, now tiptoes through the columns like a guest who knows the host is asleep. You lie there beneath the stars, no longer a traveler, not quite a follower, just someone who walked far enough to forget the road behind and care only about the softness beneath your head. You feel your heartbeat sync with the breathing of the god, not fast, not slow, just enough. The stories will go on without you now. Someone will remember this place. Someone else will dream it differently. There will be songs about the god who napped in the middle of war, who turned sleep into a strategy and laughter into surrender. But for now, none of that matters. What matters is this. You are safe. You are here. And somewhere, deep in the folds of a fading dream, a god is smiling in his sleep, whispering thanks. Not for devotion, not for belief, but for presence. So let your limbs grow heavy. Let your thoughts unspool like vines. Let the stillness be a blessing. And know this, there is no final battle, only rest, only rhythm, only the dream. Good night.